So, let's talk about captioning. There's more you need to know than just how to insert them. It's also about constructing them. First, some general rules you should always follow. You always want to research the proper capitalization of terms, even if you think you know them. And you're also going to want to make sure to check for spelling and typographical errors. Finally, as a general rule, you never want to omit words. However, there are some exceptions. One of those exceptions is non-speech sounds like and mm-hmm. There's also filler words like and like. However, you do want to include intentional interjections like probably, just, etc. You also want to omit false starts and self-corrections, unless it provides additional context. For example, my mom she just called me earlier today. You can see in that example that the false start at the beginning provides context to who the she is. That's included later in the sentence. Now, on to what not to do. First, never add content, paraphrase, or rearrange the order of a speaker's words. You also don't want to include non-speech sounds like laughing, coughing, clapping, etc. Don't include interjections or signs of active listening either. You also don't want to add letters to words or use all caps as a method of emphasis. Avoid writing long paragraphs as well. Some strategies for this include looking for natural points in the speech, such as a shift in topic, emphasis, or reference to start a new paragraph, and thus avoid run-on sentences. Now, when it comes to numbers, there are two types of formatting to consider, starting with time. So, if a speaker says 9, write out the word 9. However, if they say 9 a.m., write a.m. Now, if they say 9 o'clock or another phrase like 1:30, then you're going to write that as spoken rather than trying to convert it into a numerical format. For dates, some general rules do apply as well. So, starting with numbers under 10, you're going to make sure that those are written out, that is, spelled out, rather than written numerically. If the number is above 10, it can be written out numerically. However, it's okay to break this rule if it improves readability or consistency. Just use your best judgment. You're also going to want to specify BCE and AD, and don't correct a speaker's phrasing for decades. So if they say the 90s, don't turn it into the 1990s. For percentages, you're also going to write those out numerically. And for numbers associated with proper nouns, reflect the associated format. So Roman numerals for something like the Constitution, for example, or colons for verses. For measurements, you're going to want to make sure not to abbreviate measurements like inches and pounds, and be sure to use the feet and inches ticks for height and widths. Also, use an X rather than typing out the letter by when you're dealing with measurements like a 2x4. Now, on to grammar guidelines. When it comes to punctuation, never correct or edit a speaker's grammar. That means never changing formal speech into informal contractions. So going to gonna, for example, or you all to y'all. However, you do want to change informal contractions into formal speech. So apostrophe M to them, gonna, back into going to. It's also important to remember that statements of any length should end in either terminal punctuation, ellipses, or a hyphen. Use a terminal punctuation if the thought was complete, ellipses if the speaker trails off or significantly pauses, and a hyphen if the speaker is interrupted by another speaker. If a speaker spells out a word, use the format letter, hyphen, letter, hyphen, letter. Also, you're going to want to use hyphens to indicate abrupt interruptions and cutoffs of one speaker by another. Another important punctuation rule is to not use commas excessively. For example, in the sentence, I was going to go to the store, but decided, not to. So you can hear all those pauses in that sentence, but you don't want to put a comma after each pause. It impacts readability and is just excessive. However, you want to make sure to always use an Oxford comma when you're captioning a list. For example, I got bread, milk, and eggs at the store today. Bread, milk, and eggs need commas to separate them. Also, make sure to use quotation marks when a quote is directly stated or implied. However, do not edit or paraphrase that quote, even if you know that it's quoted incorrectly. Another important rule when it comes to quotation marks is to make sure not to use them for the titles of films, books, songs, or speeches. Finally, capitalize file extensions and other outside resources. So in the sentence, download the corresponding audio clip in Student Resources located in your Google Drive, both Student Resources and Google Drive would be capitalized. And that's the basics of captions. Be sure to book an appointment at the Digital X Studio if you'd like to learn more.